And I think that's the key to good coaches. They're able to adjust, especially in high school, whether you have slow guys, you've got more athletic teams, and every year is different, but you have to adjust. You can't just keep doing the same thing. If there's the players always, one of the sayings I always said, and the coaches, they always know if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Welcome to the JAMODI Podcast. Today we're joined by former college basketball coach Bruce Weber. His career spanned over 40 years and finished with 497 wins. He began his coaching journey as an assistant under Gene Cady at Purdue from 1980 to 1998, helping build one of the Big Ten's most consistent programs. He earned his first head coaching opportunity at Southern Illinois, where he led his teams to 2 NCAA tournament appearances, including a 2002 Sweet 16 run. Coach Weber then took over at the University of Illinois in 2003, guiding the Fighting Illini to 6 NCAA tournament berths and the 2005 NCAA championship game after a school record 37-2 season. In 2012, Coach Weber was hired at Kansas State, where he coached for a decade, earning 2 Big 12 Coach of the Year honors and capturing the 2013 Big 12 regular season title. Coach Weber retired from coaching in 2022. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at JAMODI Podcast.
Coaches and athletic directors, our sponsor Scoreboard Media has an incredible opportunity for your school. Right now, they're giving away 2 large LED video scoreboards, $152,000 value per school, to 32 select high schools across the country. Scoreboard Media pays for the boards, the software racks, and iPad controllers, as well as the delivery and installation. On top of that, they'll run the entire advertising program, generating a significant revenue sharing opportunity for the school. Since 2021, Scoreboard Media has been helping high schools upgrade their gyms and execute professional sponsorship programs. Not every school qualifies, and they're signing up new schools every week. So inventory is moving fast, and the install calendar is filling up for the summer. If you're interested, reach out to Scoreboard Media founder Charlie Megan at charlie@scoreboardmedia.com to set up a call and see if there's a fit.
Well, Coach, I just want to thank you so much for coming on here and talking hoops with me. We have been able to, and this was years ago, kind of our paths crossed a little bit with Coach Thomas, like you said, and also the amazing 2005 team that you had at Illinois, one of my former teammates, Deron Williams. So this is just an honor for me, Coach.
I heard you had Deron on once, right?
I did. Funny story is we're talking, and he was doing a great job, but he keeps drinking a can, and all throughout it. In my head, it looked like a beer can. And I just couldn't believe that Deron, this is a video deal. I use video and audio, that he's drinking on this thing. And probably 20 minutes into it, he takes a sip and he goes, "Oh, by the way, this isn't beer." And I was like, "Oh." I said, "Deron, thank you for telling me that, because I did think that you were drinking this whole time." And is that liquid death water?
Oh, yeah.
That
I have a can of
can.
that in my refrigerator.
Yeah,
You
it
want me
looks
to
like
bring
a
it
beer
on?
can, though. But that was so much fun to connect with him again. And my claim to fame, Coach, is that when he was a sophomore and I was a senior in high school, man, I think I was a little bit better than him. Just that year, though, because when I came back after my first year at Baylor and he was a junior, he was way better than me.
And then he jumped from his freshman year to his sophomore year, and then even more that next year. It's just incredible, his improvement and his IQ of the game.
Yeah.
I've coached a lot of really good players, and his intelligence and IQ is the best I've ever been around in my 45 years. So it was just amazing. He could dominate a game and not score. I always tell the story to kids. He was our 3rd or 4th leading scorer on their team, but he was the 3rd pick in the draft.
Yeah.
If you think about that, that's just because, you hear parents, I always do it with parents. My kid's got to score, all this stuff. Hey, Deron Williams, we had the Final Four game against Louisville. The first, he scored the first basket, I think, and 2 free throws at the end. But he had 10 assists, and he guarded the real good player from Louisville, Francisco or whatever his name. I can't remember the name, but he just dominated the game. And at the end, how they always, bring you, the coach and the player, to the table, and they brought Deron, and Roger Powell had like career high 20 something. Dee had 20 something. And they brought Deron. But it just showed his impact on the game. without just scoring the basketball. So it was fun. It was fun to coach him. It was a challenge. I'm sure Tommy will tell you. So it
He
was
was
something.
he was stubborn. He was stubborn, and
My goodness.
part of that intelligence, I think, is
Yeah.
him believing that he knew a good way to do things and that his way would work. And so I would imagine you balancing, you want him to be confident and to believe in himself, but you also want him to listen and trust you. How did you balance that?
It was hard. It was a challenge. Like you said, it just, even when he went with Jerry Sloan, I mean, with the Jazz, he'd call me all the time at that time, and he was so mad at Jerry Sloan, and I said, "This guy's a Hall of Famer. This guy's unbelievable.
Coach
And you're
John
fighting him.
Stockton.
This is and then finally you know I don't know when it was, but he finally broke. He kind of just figured it out. I got to listen to him, and then and Stockton and the whole bit. And the worst thing he ever did was leave the Jazz. I just, he went USA Basketball, and um, he got the agents got all around him, and all this. You got to do this. You got all that crap, and hanging out with and then I still remember one of my calls was he was deciding between Dallas and the Nets, and and I said, go to Dallas. I'm just telling you, go to Dallas. And he goes, 10 more million at the Nets. I said, Deron, how much are you going to make? It's like 120. I said, if you're worried about 10 million, but if you win in Dallas and you're a local guy, you're going to make that
Yeah.
money back. And finally, I cussed at him and I just hung up at him. And then he called me back and he said, I'm still going to Brooklyn, but I appreciate your opinion. So, but it's just it's sad how he could have been. I think if he would have just stayed with the Jazz, he would have been a long time. I think he maybe realizes it now. I don't know. He probably never admitted it because he is stubborn. But it was. I had to talk to him a lot, and I had to take his opinion. He came in the office almost every day and made fun of me. In his just teasing about what I was wearing and whatever. He always said I had the biggest head in the country, and he just did all that stuff. And then, he liked to talk, and he would, he really watched film too. That was the crazy thing. That whole group was so smart. And we're trying to have a honor the team 20th anniversary. And we got like, I think 6 of them are coaching, 6 or 7 are college basketball or NBA. And so and Deron probably, I always say Deron would have been the best coach.
Yeah.
Oh, and he would tell me, "You work too hard, coach. I'm not doing that."
Well, that says a lot about the relationship that you guys had, that over the years, you continue to talk, stayed in part of his life for some of those big moments. He made a comment about the jump that he made from even his freshman to sophomore to junior year. Coach, what were some of those things that he did that allowed him to have those big?
Well, I think the biggest thing was first his he lost weight. That was, and
Yeah.
I kind of teased him. He's teased me. I called him Pillsbury Doughboy when I got there. And I, try to put, how they do the finger in the belly and, with the Doughboy. And, finally, and I don't know if you ever heard, he broke his jaw and he couldn't eat and he lost 20 pounds. And I think that he realized that, he was, that really helped him. And then, at that time, we ran sets and stuff, don't get me wrong, but we also ran motion. And my whole thing was teaching him how to play. And he always, one thing he didn't like, that the previous coach said they didn't run much ball screen. And well, we ran ball screen, but we also ran motion. And I think I helped him learn the game as far as playing without the basketball, and so and even with the Jazz, a lot of it was ball screen stuff, but they, sometimes they needed buckets. They ran them off screens on the baseline, and he was so good at that. And then he would get, whether he scored off the, jump shot or tight curl and drop offs, which to me is the same as a ball screen anyway, but, people don't see that. So, but, I think that was the key. And then Dee Brown always said, you made me a basketball junkie, coach. And, and those guys, they partied, they had fun, but we'd win a game. They'd go back and watch the film, probably drink beer while they're watching it. They would kind of text me or something, and then they'd go out and party because I knew they were out. And then about 2 a.m., they'd go in the gym and shoot. It was just, a crazy group. So I think he just continued to learn his weight, his just understanding, and he just kept making strides. They pushed each other. Those three, Luther, Dee, and Deron, really pushed each other.
And, I've told this story before. I was always blown away by how competitive he was. And the example I give is, we would play pickup after school at open gym. And a lot of people remember the name Bracy Wright too.
Oh, yes.
And Bracy was he was more highly recruited.
Yeah.
And supposed to have a higher ceiling, higher in rankings, all this stuff. But if I had my choice between the two, I would pick Deron to be on my team because I knew we weren't going to lose a game and we were going to be playing the whole day because that dude was just so stinking competitive.
We joked about, my wife and I, that like they'd come over and, we always had them at the house and the team, and we had a big basement, ping pong table, pool table, the pool, Connect Four, all the games. And it didn't matter what we were playing. He was going to win. He put a hole in our wall in our basement playing ping pong. He was so competitive. So, he'd be sweating. We'd have recruits. We had a recruit on campus, and I kept telling him, this kid loves you. He wants to be like you. Where's your number? And Deron, like, I'm going to kick his butt. And he did. And we don't get the recruit.
You're kind of hurting us a little bit right now. Oh, man. One thing you said too, and I think this is a great goal for all of us as coaches, is to help our players learn to love the game even more, become students of the game, want to be in the gym, because especially in high school, most of the guys won't play in college and they won't.
Yes.
Their careers will end. But man, you can play this game. Even up until probably a year or two ago, I was still trying to play some 3-on-3 when I could, until I just realized, man, my body feels way better when I don't play. But you can love the game and keep playing it for a long time. I think that's a good goal for all of us.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's there's parts of the player, obviously the physical, and that's your God gifts. And, guys say, can I play in the NBA? Well, do you have God's gifts? For the most part,
Yeah.
there's the rare percentage that overachieves, but, Deron's body, his physicality, all that, and Glenn Robinson, guys that I've coached through the years, they were given those physical. Then there's the heart and the competitiveness. And that's what takes the guys from a whole nother level. And, you hear this, you watch the stuff on Michael Jordan. I coached Deron.
Yeah.
That you talked about, the competitiveness and all that. It's just kind of amazing. But then there's the mental part. And that's when when you get older, understanding the game and knowing angles and how to play. And, and that's, I think in Europe, when I've done clinics over there and coach USA basketball and different things, that those guys, they always say, oh, they have old man game. Well, yeah, they're smart. They learned how to play. People have taught them how to play. And I think so. You have all those things. And when you get older, you still got the brains. You might not have the jump or the quickness or whatever. And then you still have if you love to play, you're competing, but you got to compete with your brain and be smart about it. Oh, I can't go in and dunk anymore, but I sure can make a layup, or I can dish it off or whatever. So I think that's with all the guys.
You mentioned the European players and how they know how to play. So they act as if they're older. They know they have a higher IQ or a high IQ, and they know angles. Coach, what are they doing over there to make that happen in these younger players?
I think the biggest thing is they play games. Obviously, they have international competition. They also play with older guys. And I think that's so important. I just know from my own family, we got 3 boys. I learned from my brother. I'm 8th, 9th grade. I'm playing with high school kids. My younger brother then joins us later on. My brother's in college. I'm in high school. He's in 7th, 8th grade. He's playing with us, and you start to learn how to play. So playing with older guys, but I did a clinic at the European Championships in Istanbul, and I was a Turkish coach who was an assistant on the national team. He was our host, and I would go do the clinic, and then guys would start coming into the gym like 11 a.m. And I was like, these are high school kids. Don't they go to school? And they already got their stuff done. And he said, now they work on their skills. And what are we doing? And I've said this for years. We're going to play AAU. We're going to play games. You need games, don't get me wrong, but that skill development, that the dedication to learning the game, all those things, I think that's the difference maker with the international players, and they don't totally rely on their physical gifts. They rely on their skill, and they develop their skill, and then also.
Now, that's a great nugget. Stan Leach is a well-known coach in the Texas high school world. Did it for 40 plus years. And one thing he talked about was skill work. For a coach, he said, if you're investing in your future of your program and players, you're going to do skill work. If you're just trying to win right now, you're going to work on plays and sets and all of those things that may help you in the moment. I think that's a stretch, or maybe a goal for all of us, is to be investing in the future of our players by making sure we set aside time for skill work.
There's no doubt. And you can ask, we've talked about your former teammate, Deron Williams, that, you would ask, if you ask him from the first day of practice, we were doing skill work to start out practice, and going into the Final Four, we were still doing skill work at the end of the year. Every day we did it. Obviously, at the beginning of the year, you have 30 minutes and you're doing a skill work and concept work at the same time. Or you get later in the season, you're going to cut back your practice time so you don't have as much, but you're still doing skill work. And then the best part, you asked earlier when we were just kind of chatting about why did Deron make such a step? Well, when we cut back practice, he would stay with Dee Brown and Luther Head, and then other guys with Roger Powell started joining, and they just played one-on-one. And there's no better thing to play than one-on-one. I always, when I speak at camps, and I did a couple weeks ago with younger kids, I said, you all want to play 5-on-5, but you can't get guys to play 5-on-5. Plus, think about it. I always say, who's a good math student? And, how many balls are there that you play at one? How many players? Well, if you play a game 5-on-5, you only have 10% of a chance. And then there's always better players. So your chance of getting the ball is probably 5%, maybe 3%.
Yeah.
But if you play one-on-one, you got it half the time. And that's how you get better. You play 2-on-2, 3-on-3. To me, the best, I love 3-on-3. And we played 3-on-3 all the time to start practice. It was part of our skill development. The thing they hated the most, I played 3-on-3 without dribble. It's like giving them cancer that they couldn't dribble the basketball. But I taught them how to play, even at camps years ago. And I didn't do it later because then kids might not come back. But when we were at Purdue all my years there, we always played 3-on-3 and 4-on-4 without the dribble with the campers. Now we had them for a whole week and we had them overnight, and, you had more time. But we were even trying to help those kids learn how to play without the basketball and develop those skills. But you have to, it's so important, when you talk about things you have to do on a daily basis to have a successful program, that is one of them. And there's no doubt about it, is skill development.
And Doug Novak said everything is skill development. I mean, all throughout your practice, even in those 3-on-3 games, when you take out the dribble, you're really going to see who has a high IQ and who doesn't, who can play off each other, who can read how they're being guarded, when to cut, and where those openings are, who has the ability to see something and do what they see. I see my teammates open and I can deliver that pass on time and on target. Coach, that's all skill work. And I think you're right on the money with doing some type of individual skill work leading into those 2-on-2 and 3-on-3 games. That's a great formula.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And that's how we started practice, every day. And I'd even trick them with defensive stuff. Part of our stretching, I told one of our strength coaches, we got to figure out how to do our defensive footwork as part of stretching. So he just kind of implemented that too. Your step slides, you're doing your warm-ups and your, different things like that. So sometimes you got to trick them. There's no doubt about them, and they don't even, oh, we're working on defense. They don't even really know it because you're working on the footwork and things like that. Because what do you know how kids are. As soon as they hear defense, they're shutting you down. So
Right.
and that's part of skill work too. That you have to do that, and the more you can implement that, and basketball's a game of habits and a game of repetition, I did it for 45 years. I went to camps I still remember going to camp in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I remember Rick Majerus's talk on one-on-one. I was 9 years old, 10 years old at a Catholic grade school, and he was speaking. And I give almost a similar presentation now. So basketball, it's repetition. It hasn't changed. Learning footwork, learning angles, learning to get that first step by somebody. Reading the defensive, how they're set up, how their footwork is set up. So those are things that I still do. It's 50, 60 years later or whatever. So basketball, it's changed, but it hasn't.
5 years in college basketball, I would imagine your daily habits were a big reason why you're able to have such an amazing career. So, what are some of those daily things that you did or still do that set you up for success?
I really think the most important thing is one, you got to communicate. The successful coaches, one, they're teachers. And I started as a fifth grade teacher. I only did it for 1 year.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I wanted to be a college coach. Our whole family taught and coached. My older brother's in the Wisconsin High School Hall of Fame. My younger brother, David, coached college. And then he actually is in the Illinois High School Hall of Fame. Coach John Shire. His Glenburg North team won the state championship. It was really cool. John brought back the whole team to Duke this year for a game, and brought his guys because it was also I think the 20th anniversary of their state championship. So, which
That's
was
cool.
cool. But sisters, dad taught. So I think it's so important. You got to be a teacher. To be able to communicate is so important. To talk to the players. We mentioned earlier, Deron came in every day. I didn't have to beg him to come in. He was comfortable with coming in. But if they don't come in, you got to make them come in, and you got to find ways to talk to them. I also heard Dee Brown at clinics talk years ago. The guys that don't talk during stretching, he would just go walk and sit next to them and kind of act like he was stretching, so you got to have communication with them. It's so important. And then, then the leadership is getting the most out of guys, bringing them together. I think those are keys with the coaches. And then that all becomes part of the daily habits. Every morning when I got to the office, I went and saw every coach and, what's going on? Who'd you talk to last night? What do we need to work on if somebody has a scout? What do I need to think about? Just kind of getting that going. And then the staff meetings. To me, when people say, what do you miss about coaching? I miss the staff meetings. I miss their interaction with the players. That was special for me. And we would always meet. We'd watch some film. The guy who had the scout he had to give his little presentation. So, and then we'd all sit, if there was somebody, let's say we're playing Michigan State and they run a certain set. Well, I tell them, let's see about 10 of those sets. And then we all sit and talk. How are we going to guard? How we, or then the other end, they guard a certain way. What are we going to do? And then that goes to your skill development drills, how we're going to attack the ball. They're icing it. How are we going to attack that? So now we can work on that in the skill development. So that, interaction, the one-on-one, the group. And then I talked about teacher. It goes back to the lesson plans. They all went to lunch. I didn't go to lunch. I love to sit. That was my time to, do my practice plan. I loved it. It was my, pride and joy. And then I would do that, get it typed out. I give it to the coaches, and then they would go through it. And then somebody would say, hey, we need to add this, coach. We need to do this or whatever. And then we kind of tweak it. And then the same thing, once the players started, they started coming in the office. Again, your Deron Williams, your Barry Browns, guys that they love coming in and watching film. And, so they're coming in, you're talking to them. Then you get down to, I told the coaches, so important to get down on the court at least 15 to 20 minutes early for the guys that are there early and start, one, talking and finding out how they're doing their day, all that stuff, but then also starting to work individual with them. And then obviously you got your practice, your skill development, your breakdown of whatever your concepts, your defense, your offense. And then after, and sometimes as a head coach, you got it, it's at a university of high level, you're an ambassador and you got to run somewhere or do a talk or something. But when you don't, I tried to always stay. And guys that are struggling, I tried to take them and work on shooting, or whatever it is, and just be with them. Guys want individual attention, and as best you can do that. And then you go back to the office and you're talking to the coaches. What do you think? And then I always told the coaches, I don't care if they get after players, but they better talk to them after practice. Either, you can get on guys. And I learned this from my old boss, Coach Katie. He was a master at it. He would berate guys. And this is old school stuff. I mean, I know you can't do some of that stuff now, but he got after him. But those guys love him to this day. He's 80, he turned 88, I think, in May. And those guys just, when you hear them, they loved him because he talked to them. I saw him, Brad Miller, longtime NBA guy, all-star, Olympian, the whole bit. He kicked Brad out of practice. He was so mad at him. I was worried for Brad. I'm looking around for him after practice. I go back up to office and coach is up there laughing and making jokes and stuff. And I kind of peek in his office and there's Brad. He's telling Brad stories and joking with him. And he had just kicked him out of practice and told him he was the worst player in the history with a lot of adjectives around it. But again, so I learned that from him. Once he told me, I got mad at a player. I was young. I was so fortunate to be college coaching, 22 years old, 23. And I got mad at a player and he was just an okay player. One day he just kind of quietly said, "Hey, you haven't been talking to Ryan at all." And I was like, "Yeah, he's a knucklehead coach, blah, blah, blah." And he goes, "I just have a question for you. Who's the adult and who's the young man?" And I just kind of hit me. And, I said, "I'm the adult coach." "Yeah, I hope so." And he goes, "Well, then act like one and go help him." And so then, and it just kind of changed my relationship with them and my thoughts of it. So whether you're going to work with them after practice, you got to text them, you got to call them, and you got to make sure they understand. So they, if you got after them, you want it not to be a bad thing, a good thing. And so I think that was always part of it. Then at night, late, I tried to give some family time as much as I could. But when they all went to bed, now I'm talking to the coaches. They're sending me clips with different things. I watch film late at night. I was a late night guy. So that was kind of the daily routine that we went through and what I tried to do. And one thing I'm really proud of with my assistants, I want them to be successful in the future. So I learned from Coach Katie. I was involved in practice. I was on the court. I was talking. I was, if I'm in charge of scout, I'm giving the scout. So I learned, I'm sure you know Alvin Brooks, obviously.
Yeah.
Al, when he was with me at K-State, I always have the assistant coaches do the radio. And I didn't think it was a big deal, like the pregame radio, scouting report.
Oh, that's
things
cool.
like that.
Yeah.
And Al came up to me one day and he goes, "I just got to thank you." And I said, "For what, Al?" He goes, "To let me do the radio." And I it's helping me because I don't have the time. But he said, "Coach, I never got to do this and it's going to help me for my future." And again, little things like that. You're developing assistant coaches and I'm proud of what my guys have done, the success as head coaches, as continuous as assistant coaches all over the place. And it's fun. Not only are you hopefully helping your players, but you're also helping your coaches.
With so many golden nuggets there. And I kind of jotted down a few notes to go back through. One is I love the idea of us viewing ourselves more as teachers than just coaches. And especially if you are in the high school world where you literally, most of the time, we're going to have a classroom that we have to do things in. And as I recently got the job at Waco Midway High School, and so making a transition from Dallas Fort Worth back to Waco, which has been really fun. But in my second interview with the principal, she made a really good point about the classroom. She said, remember, this is 90% of what your job is.
Yes.
And in my mind, there was a light bulb moment because I think I viewed it the other way around. The coaching part is the 90%, the 10% is that teaching part in the classroom. But when we view ourselves as teachers, I think what that does is it makes us have extreme ownership over what's actually happening because we're not just coaching, we're teaching. And if they're not learning or getting the things that we're teaching, it's not their fault. It's our fault because we're not teaching it properly or the best, right?
Yes, there's no doubt. And, again, I only taught fifth grade 1 year, but I think it really helped me, getting kids, you have all different learning abilities. Deron Williams came in and said to me, Coach, why are we doing all this scout and report film, walk through, live, back to walk through, and he goes, we don't need this. I said, you don't need it, Deron, but your teammates knew it. And you're going to
Yeah,
be mad
that's a
at
good
them when
point.
they screw up, in the game. And he looked at me and he just walked away. It's like, but everyone learns differently, as in the classroom. And I was fortunate, I came from a teaching family and my brothers were high school coaches. So I was hearing their side. And when I go talk to high school clinics or clinics, it's mostly high school coaches. I could hopefully, as a college coach, a little bit relate to them because it is a tough job, and you are teaching, and you're still you got to get your practice plan. You got to have interaction with the players. You got to have interaction if you have a staff, and so it's a tough job, but you are a teacher, and it goes back. I had the good fortune of being around Coach Wood, and he was a Purdue grad. It just some circumstances. He came back a couple times. We have a friend I have a high school friend that helped us in Wisconsin that helped us get into coaching. With him, he gave us my brother and I our first jobs, but he would go to Coach Wooden's camp, so he got to know him through the years. And Coach Wooden always talked about being a teacher first, and that was one thing it really resonated with me when I listened to him and had opportunities to talk to him, walk with him, and listen. He was a teacher, and I think that's so important. And there's different ways of teaching. As you know, I mean, everyone doesn't learn the same, so you got to figure out how can I get everyone to learn in that team, in that classroom, and get that same message across.
Almost everything we take them through. I think, and this is a PGC idea, that there are three ways. You got some guys need to hear it, other
Yes,
guys need to see it, and then
yes,
some guys need to do it. And what's the best? How do we get all of our the guys on the same path? Everything we teach, they get to hear it, see it, do it. So that way you're making sure you're not missing anybody. And a great nugget, coach, you said, is getting down to the court early. I think that's a great way to steal moments with players because I've been able to do this for 4 years now, which has been really fun. And sometimes coaches will talk about things that they wish they could have done more, or like you even have done the things you miss. You miss the coaches meetings, and I'm sure you also miss the interaction with players in that time. But they wish they would do that more. Getting down there early is a great way to have more moments. And also, too, more is caught than taught. And so when we want them to be early to the gym because that's a good habit for leaders and for them to be prepared, well, coach, it just makes sense that we're there as well.
yes. And I told them, and again, not only yourself, but your assistants too, and get down there and just don't stand there and be mad at them. Talk to them, and help them figure out maybe they had a bad day. And then you can tell me, hey, something happened at home or, whatever. So now they're going to struggle. So I can say something to them or help them or know they're not going to have the effort today or they had a bad test or whatever happened that you can help them. I think it's so important because you don't want to waste you only get so many hours of practice and now it's less and less. When I first started with Coach Gady, you talk to Matt Painter and guys, they'll tell stories, and obviously it gets exaggerated. But we were going 3.5, 4 hours a day and never gave them days off. But but you didn't have summer workouts, you didn't have all that other stuff. But it's different. You want to really use your time, and it's so important. Again, it goes back to what you talked about. Different people learn different ways, and that's what I tried to explain to Deron. He could learn just because I said it. And other guys needed to see it, and other guys needed to go through it. So we had to continually go over it and over it. And then, and that, getting down there early, not only the interaction, but also the chance to work on something. I always talked about players. I said Deron would come in office, Barry Brown would come in office. Then there's other guys they don't even want to see it, and especially when they're younger and they've been yelled at for the first time and corrected. I guess I say yelled at, corrected, told they're not as good.
Yeah.
You recruit them and tell them they're the greatest thing ever, and they get there, and all of a sudden, the first practice, they don't know how to
There's a
dribble, they don't know
switch.
how to pass, they don't, So you've been through that, you know. It's just, so I always thought there's a wall between the coaches and the players, and the quicker you can get those players over that wall, the easier it is to coach them, and they're going to join you as a group. And usually freshman year, you're afraid, you're afraid of the coaches, you're struggling. Sophomore year, a little better. Junior year, you're starting to climb over it. And then senior year, hopefully you're part of the whole thing. But the earlier you can do that, the easier it is for you to, for them to understand. And I always thought redshirt, obviously you can't do this in high school, but in college, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world because now they were on the wall between the players and the coaches, and they weren't competing for a spot. And they would come in the office and say, Coach, why doesn't he listen to you? You're trying to help him. Well, no kidding, but he would see it from a different angle because and he almost became part of the staff. And I think that's when you get guys to become almost like connected with the staff. That's when you have the success. You've made progress with the players. You brought them together.
That was one of my favorite parts, being a college player was obviously going, like you said, going through that freshman year is just your eyes are so wide open. Everything is new. You're dealing with sometimes 22-year-old, the seniors like Terry Black and DeMarcus Minor that don't really want to have too much to do with you as a freshman and a sophomore or as a freshman player. But man, you go through that. It's the beautiful struggle, right? You go through that struggle and then you become a sophomore and it's like, okay, I'm starting to understand and be a part of these rhythms even more. Coach, I think my question to you is now that the landscape is so different, take this Baylor team this year. They have 0 returning players from the previous year. So you're not having the time with the players to that like he's struggling now, but man, if he sticks with it in a year or two, he's gonna have it. How do coaches do it now? Building that type of relationship, and I'm gonna use the C word, culture that you used to build and that you've been talking about. How do they do it?
Yeah, it really is the biggest challenge, I think. And it's funny when you say culture, when I first started, no one used the word culture. They didn't
No
know
one
what it
used
was.
that word, right?
Coach or brand. I laugh. Coach Katie did brand and culture before anyone else. We had our play hard brand. That was the thing. And he put play hard on the bottom of his shorts, and he had the sign when you walked out of the gym that said play hard, and the locker room. And it was our brand, but no one said it was the brand. It was just part of it, the culture, togetherness, the family, all those things. We were doing those things way back. Now it's the cliche.
That's right.
My wife and I always laugh every morning we hear the word iconic. I don't know how people use that word all the time. Well, I guess that means you're old, iconic, and so. But the culture, iconic, brand, those kind of words are, it's different. But it's hard now, and you got to do your best. I think one of the things, and if we talk about the future of the game, and I'm still in, I'm in the BTN Big Ten Network, in the studio, but I have coaches out there, and I talk to them all the time, and one thing is, and you can't, Coach Drew can't do anything about it. He has no one,
Yeah.
but I think one of the biggest things is you got to try to keep a couple guys within the program that understand it, that you're connected with. I think that is so vital if you can, if it's possible. The second thing, I think, when you're recruiting guys now, you got to get guys that played in good programs. It doesn't matter how high a level. You see so many Missouri Valley Conference kids having success at the next level. Well, one, they're older. Two, they've been coached. They've been in good programs. It's competitive. Those kids have had success in the Big Ten that I'm watching, and they played for good coaches. And then, were they coached? Were they demanded of things of them? I think that's important. So it's when you're going in the portal, it's not always how high they can jump or how many dunks. I get this all the time from guys sending me videos of kids. What do you think of the kids? And they show me 7 dunks. Well, they didn't show me dribble, pass, or shoot. And I'd like, how the heck do I know what the kid can do? So you better put time in to, not only the physical part obviously is important, but the were they coached, the mental part. Do they understand the game, the competitive? You talk about Deron Williams, and you can, you don't have much time, but again, who did he play for? Which coaches? Because which coaches coach these guys, and other guys just let them play. It's just part of it. In high school when you go against guys. So, that, and now once you get them, you're going to have to start. It's almost like starting over if you can find a leader. And it's hard to be a leader. I remember somebody telling me, oh, I can't be a leader, coach. I just got here. I said, yes, you can be a leader. It doesn't matter. When I go to a group, I try to become the leader if possible. If there isn't somebody there, you have to, somebody's got to do that. So that summer workouts are even more important, getting that leadership, the camaraderie, the events. How do you get guys? You talked about the seniors had nothing to do with you, or I'm making sure at least once a week, twice a week, we're doing things together. We're going to movies, we're going bowling, we're coming to the house, we're doing a community project, and that's where you start developing the leadership, the camaraderie, the togetherness, which guys you can play together. And then you almost have to fast forward the summer with the practice stuff. You got to start figuring some stuff out about your team and bringing them together and how you're going to put, this unit together. So it's hard. It's a challenge. I feel sorry for guys. But again, if you can keep 2 or 3, especially the main guys, it's going to help you because when we joke about culture, but culture, brand, togetherness,
Standards. Yeah.
It's so important.
I had the honor of getting to talk with Coach Campy after his great run against Kentucky a couple of years ago. When they beat them, and I asked him because he's been at his school at Oakland for 40 plus years. I said, Coach, what's it like to build a program there, and what are some things you got to do? He's like, Matt, like it's not about building a program anymore. He says it's about building teams. Like, and it was like we could look at that, and like that to me is a little sad. I like the idea of building a program, doing something that has a higher purpose, and older players teaching younger players and passing on the torch. But it's like you got to adapt or die, right? Like you have to just change with what's happening. So I believe these coaches now are becoming master team builders. And you nailed it, Coach. You went right into some of those things that we have to create is experiences that will fast track these relationships that we used to say was more like, I don't know, more like a crock pot, right? Like where you're going to put all these ingredients in, and over hours and hours and hours, it's going to become a team. Well, now, like you said, we got to be doing things that build these experiences fast.
It used to be a 2-year process. Now it's a 5 months process, and you got it, but again, those ingredients I think are so important to put in. And now when I even talk at clinics all the time, I'm a high school coach, you don't have a choice for the most part who that ingredients is, who the players are. But in college, you do have that, and it's so important if you can getting those right guys that fit in. And again, that it's a crapshoot a little bit that recruit kids and think, oh, he's going to be a great kid, and he gets to college, and all of a sudden he's crazy. It's just like, wait a minute, he didn't. You probably had friends. They got to college, and it's like, wait a minute, their personality changed. So that's a whole nother dynamic you have to deal with. So, but it is not easy. It's a tough situation. I feel for coaches, but one of the things when we talked about keys to being a good coach,
Yeah,
this
let's
is
do that.
one of the things Coach Katie taught me years ago. You have to be flexible. He told me this 50 years ago, if you want to stay in the business, you got to learn to be flexible. When, he was an all defensive coach, and then all of a sudden you get the 3-point shot. We had to adjust. We got Glenn Robinson. We had to adjust. He sent me to Rick Pitino in Boston, and we learned how to press, and we changed our whole thing because we had better players, and I think that's the key to good coaches. They're able to adjust, especially in high school. Whether you have slow guys, you've got more athletic teams, and every year is different, but you have to adjust. You can't just keep doing the same thing. If there's the players always, one of the sayings I always said, and the coaches, they always know, if nothing changes, nothing changes. If you keep losing to this team and don't change, nothing's going to change. You have to change and keep up with it and be flexible. And it's one of the big things, as a coach to be successful. If you want to stay in a business, you have to be flexible and you have to change, and you got to continue to learn. When we talk about teaching and being a teacher of the game, part of that is learning, continuing to learn the game. The game changes, staying up with it. That, to me, it's sad. And I know you can watch videos, but I used to love to go to clinics. I started going to clinics at 19, 20, taking notes for a group. It was Metallist Industries. They were one of the first ones that started clinics. And that's when I got to walk with Coach Wooden at 19 years old. He said, young fella, you get up early? And I'd like, not. I said, if you need me to do something, I didn't really get up early, but he said, I walk at 6:00, meet me in the lobby. You can walk with me. And I got a chance to walk with him. And, but now guys don't go to clinic. I go speak at a clinic, and there's, 30 people, and it's sad. Now, schools aren't paying for it and this and that. I understand my brothers went through that, and they can buy tapes and put it in the library, and that's fine. I understand. But I think that interaction of being at the clinic or going to a practice, I think one of the greatest things for young coaches, go to practices. If you got a good high school coach, go to his practice. You got college coaches, they don't care. They want you to come. They want you to interact. I always laugh, the best programs, high school programs, they were the ones that would bring their whole staff to our basketball for 2-3 days, and they'd do a retreat, and they would sit with our staff, and they would sit in meetings, and they would watch film with coaches, and they come to practice, and then after they'd want to talk, and they were learning. These guys, that's why they're good. That's why it's not. I made our guys go to NBA practices. Hey, one of the best models right now, when you talk about, is Oklahoma City. And you talk about character, you talk about getting guys that are the right fit, under not the high level, and don't get me wrong, their best player is really good, but the rest of the guys, I'm watching Santa Clara on a clip tape years ago, and I'm like, we weren't playing them, but we were playing the other team, and I'm like, who is this kid? He's really good. He's an NBA player. And then now when the NBA playoffs are going on, one of my assistants said, Coach, you called it, whatever it was 6 years ago. So, but that's part of it. Again, character's important. It makes a difference. You talk about Baylor. Not only did they have talent, not only were they old when they won the national championship, but they had great kids that got along. And I'm sure Scott has told you that. You probably witnessed it, and that makes a difference.
So flexible. One of the reasons I love getting to do this, to have a talk with you, is the stories that you get to share, not only about yourself, but about those people that you've worked with. I wouldn't have thought of Coach Katie, and this is just because of I have no experience. It's only what I've seen on TV. He has a demeanor that to me, even watching through the TV is intimidating. You're like, golly, that dude's tough just watching him. But so I would have thought more just my guess would be rigid, my way. We're not changing all of this. So it's really cool to hear a story like that.
Yes. When I do clinics, I always say, and this is years ago, and he was still coaching then, or people knew him more, the least person you would think would be flexible would be Coach Katie. And yet he was. I mean, it was, and I even the relationship part, all the stuff, the interaction with the players, and he would. We always said he didn't understand. He would look at something. He would like come in. I saw Portland run this. Go find this. You know, he didn't understand why it worked, but I'd go find the play, and then it was something we used all year, you know. And now he didn't understand the little details of why it worked. We had to do that as an assistant, but that's what he would do, and he just had a knack of finding things, figuring things out. You know, just we were doing family stuff, you know, bonding stuff. Oh, 40 some years ago, you know, and like, but it wasn't on TikTok and it wasn't on, so people didn't know it, but we were doing all that stuff. One of the great, and I don't know, did you ever get to go on an international tour with your team with Baylor while you were there?
Yes, we went. Well, let me think. Not overseas. I actually went with Tate's Lock. Coach Bliss hooked me up with Tate's Lock and got to go on a Europe trip with him for a
Yes.
week, which is a blast. But we went more south. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the biggest team bonding things is going on an international trip to take guys for 10 days and go in a tough place where they had no choice. No one else could speak to them, because you're going in didn't understand the language, play tough games. Anytime I took over a program, I asked the athletic director if I could take those teams. When I went to Southern Illinois, we went to Dominican Republic with no money because we were the first team to ever go there. And those guys, our players 27, 28 years ago will still talk about that trip and how it brought us together. When we went to Illinois with Deron in that group, we went to Estonia and Sweden and Finland, and it was a hard trip, but it brought us together. Yeah. It was part of our team. When I went to Kansas State, we went to Brazil that first summer. Almost every time, and I told Coach Izzo, who I love, he didn't really like going on trips. He always said, I want to take my time, that you only get a couple of weeks off in August or something. I want to use it to be around my family and that. But right before last season, they went to Italy. Well, guess what happened with his group this year? They were one of the best teams in the country, won the Big Ten. I can tell you, we won at Purdue 6 Big Ten championships when I was assistant. And I bet 5 of the 6 we went on international trips with, before that. And again, when you talk about bonding and doing things together, I think any type of thing like that, you can simulate, bring the guys together, do stuff. I think it's important.
You also mentioned that coaches, we need to have a growth mindset. And it's kind of funny, even though I love getting to do this and talk with coaches, I basically get to hold you captive for an hour or so and ask you questions and learn from you, which is great. But I think you nailed it. This podcast thing, it's awesome and it's convenient, but it should not, in my opinion, take the place of going to clinics or going to practices. To me, walking into the TABC clinic, there is this, and I kind of jotted this down. There's like an awe or there's like gratitude that I feel when I walk into that clinic of this is so special what we get to do. And look at all of these other coaches that are here, all trying to pursue the same thing, which is just to get a little bit like 1% better. And I think I do think we missed that by not going to clinics.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And international, when you ask about the difference, like I've done a clinic in Poland. Every coach, they have to go every year to a clinic to keep their license, their coaching license.
Yeah.
So it just, And those guys were happy to be there and loved it. Are you going to a clinic to hang out and go drink a beer after or what, or are you going to actually learn? You can still learn and go have a beer and interact and talk to guys and have fun. That's part of it. But, it's just, that's just that it's so, I think it's sad, to be honest. And, one thing I talk about all the time is, and I've said this for many years, I'm an older coach now. We don't use the wisdom of older coaches, and we don't help our young coaches. And finally, the NCAA is starting to allow those guys to be on coach. When I was first a GA, I could coach on the court, I could recruit, I could do, I could scout, I could do all those things. And then all of a sudden, they put in all those rules because somebody abused the rules and got, somebody had 10 grad assistants or whatever. And so it was unfair. So they had to put in rules, but it hurt the young coaches. How do you get experience if you're just a video guy? Can't go on the court. You're not supposed to be talking to the players about basketball. Which to me it was like that. What kind of rules are these? But I think it's so important that we help them. And even as a high school coach, if I'm a high school coach and you need help, you need coaches. I know my brothers are Hall of Fame coaches, high school Hall of Fame. My brother in Illinois, he coaches freshman basketball now and helps the varsity guy. He's retired, but he does that. My older brother is in his 70s, and he goes back and helps his son, who's a high school head coach in Wisconsin, and he coached freshmen. And you can always find guys in your community that want to coach and want to help and be around it, and they actually might know something. It's not they're not trying to get your job. They're just trying to help. And it's just, I think it's great when I go to programs and you see guys there that are helping out, with kids on the side and they're older guys that, to me, one of the favorite things with our grandkids is going to help, with little kids, bitty basketball or whatever, it's so much fun. I just love it. And if we can get them to accomplish something and I can give them some ideas, it's a positive thing.
Going to practices, I think you're right on the money. I love the idea of having the whole staff go, because I think, especially as a head coach, we want to give our players a ton of opportunities to be in the gym. Let's give our assistant coaches a ton of opportunities to learn the game. And man, while now being in Waco, I got to go watch Baylor's practice a few weeks back. And even though there are some things that don't translate, right, between the 8 grad assistants and managers, the 6 or 7 coaches, but you know what? Be creative and find out, how can I pare this down to work with the resources that I do have? That's a part of it. If my staff, and they were out of town, so this isn't an indictment on those 2 guys, but if we could have gone to that all together, man, like, hey, this drill right here, how could we stand? What could we do, the 3 of us, to create this type of environment? And, you mentioned like there's videos and things like that. Those are great resources, but what you miss are the little conversations, the interactions, the way players react to things that are being said, the huddles, the time management, the flow that every great practice has. You don't get to, in my opinion, you don't get to see that through the film the same as sitting there and watching it live.
There's no doubt. And going up after and saying thanks for coming and, hey, coach, on this drill, why'd you do this? You know what I mean? Or why does it work?
Yeah.
I can tell you, I can go in my head real quickly, like 10 different drills or plays when I sent my assistants out and they brought back, you might go to a practice for 2 hours and you'll find one thing, one drill, one thing at a clinic, one play that might change your season. And it's funny. A 30-second drill, I can go through drills that our guys brought back or we simulated into our system. It's what I talked about with Coach Katie. He'd be watching an NBA game. Hey, this is pretty good. What can you go find it? And this is before you could, watch every game on. So it was hard to find things. And he wouldn't always be real detailed, like, well, it was at 7 minutes and 6 seconds left in the third quarter. He would like, oh, it was in the second half. Okay, coach, thanks. And,
Just
so,
find it
but
in those 20 minutes.
yeah, I got all the time in the world, coach. I'm recruiting, but it's just those, those little things that can make a difference and you can learn. Again, I said one of my favorite sayings, if nothing changes, nothing changes. But another one is that when you stop learning, you stop living. And I think it's so important. And when you stop dreaming, you stop living too. So all that stuff is, for me, it's like, if you want to be a coach and be successful, you better continue to be flexible. You got to continue to learn, to get your assistants to learn, be involved, and keep dreaming for yourself, for your players, and for your staff.
I think there's a humility that you got to have to continue to have a growth mindset, because basically what you're saying is, I don't have this all figured out. I don't know everything. There's something else out there that maybe I could learn that'll make myself better, make my team better. And this image of JD Mayo, longtime coach at Skyline High School in the Dallas Fort Worth area, retired now in uh, 70s or maybe even his 80s. And he will, at this year's TABC, he will be there and he'll be in the front row and he'll have his yellow legal pad out and he'll be taking notes. And it was years ago, probably 10, 15 years ago, I was there and I had my notebook out, but the speaker was talking about something that, like a zone offense. No
Yes, that you
offense to
didn't
guys
think
that
it
have a
was fit.
great, yeah, it just wasn't something if they guard us in a zone, we're going to shoot it even faster. We're just going to get in dangerous spots. But I was zoning out. I wasn't taking notes, disrespecting a little bit of maybe the presenter's time, but I had a fixed mindset, coach. Like, I thought, I got this. I don't need this. And there's JD Mayo, not even coaching anymore. I mean, he is hanging on every word that's being said. Man, talk about personal goals. That's it right there.
Yeah, and again, if you love the game, you respect the game, and the game's been good to you, you continue to do that. There's a college clinic. I don't know if you know the name. Larry Shyatt was a longtime assistant for Billy Donovan, and he was also a head coach at a couple times at Cleveland State, Clemson. But he also
Coach Driscoll worked for him, Matthew Driscoll,
yes,
because I think he mentioned him before.
yeah. So, and actually, Larry ended his career as the Mavericks assistant coach. That's how
Oh, wow.
respected he was. But Larry does a college and NBA coaches every year at Florida. He's done this for years and years, and he'll have he gets NBA guys to come in and variety of top. It's and you got to pay to come but you see which coaches really care, even college guys, because you can get in if you want, and I'm sure some high school guys could even get in. But the one I bring up is Del Harris.
Oh, yeah.
Dell is there. Not only he speaks, he's taking notes. I'm speaking, and he raises his hands. He's asking me questions about. He goes, I never even thought of this concept. And this man, think of how long he's coached, and it always hit me. This is, you love guys that really care about the game, and they appreciate, that they have an opportunity to continue to give wisdom. And again, it goes back to what I said. We don't use the wisdom of our older coaches. And then, and it goes back to when you talk about zoning out and guys that won't change. And all the time when you see guys that have a successful years and now they think they've made it, all of a sudden they have a new group the next year and they're not ready. And all of a sudden their career totally changes. And being flexible, continuing to change, it's something, again, I learned from Coach Katie, who you would, as you said, probably didn't look like a flexible guy, but he definitely helped us learn to continue to learn and grow as a coach, which will help your players in your program.
You've shared so many amazing nuggets with meeting with players, and sometimes you got to force them to sometimes, but you probably feel like you're in a really good place when they're stopping by quite a bit. And I would imagine that really helps with their confidence, because I think so many times as a high school coach, we may think that, or even a high school player, that high school kids deal with confidence issues, but when you get to college or the pros, you don't. And then just a story of Nick Anderson with the Orlando Magic and those free throws he missed and how his career went on just a different trajectory because of confidence. So it hits all of us, coaches or players. But what were some of those things that you did to help players that were struggling maybe with their confidence?
Well, I think the most important thing is to talk to them, what we've been talking about this whole time, and getting there early and getting them. I always say when they're not on the clock, when practice starts, they're on the clock, right? It's the time. I guess it would be. I hope it's not a job, and I hope they love it. But in their mind, it becomes a grind, especially as a season. So get them off the clock, and that means whether it's in the office, it's before practice, if they get there early, after practice, when practice is over, say, hey, come up to the office before you run out. Just talking to them, watching film with them, and making sure, I told you earlier, I told assistants, if you're gonna help him, you got to talk to him, get him on the phone, send them some clips, text with them that night. There's so many tools that we didn't have when I first started. When I first started reel to reel, and I had to carry all those 4 canisters of film for a game. So you just couldn't watch it. And then it went to the videotape, and, obviously now it's totally different. And so you have all those tools, but one-on-one, working with them with their shot. After practice, guys are struggling with their shot. I always loved it. That's my pride and joy. I'm getting out the weighted ball, and we're doing one-hand form shooting, and we're working our way back. And then you got to start over. When guys are struggling, what happens in baseball? You go to a tee, you go to the batting cage. Well, it's the same thing in basketball. You got to start over. You got to go and do your one-handed shooting, your form shooting. You got to build it up, and it's just not going to happen. I talked about basketball being repetition and habits. Coach Katie had another saying, I know he got it from somebody else, 29 days creates a habit. So it's not going to change overnight. You've got a little hitch in your shot that you developed or something, or you didn't continue to work on your form shooting like you should. Then that's where you help them and help them before practice, after practice, just doing those stuff. Now they start feeling better about themselves. And it might be just one shot gets them to feel good. The kids always say, you got to give me confidence. Well, it's also, as a coach, the players have to give the coach the confidence to put them in the game.
No doubt. Yeah.
And, parents will say, you don't give them a chance. Well, I do give them a chance every day in practice for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, whatever it might be. He has a chance. Workouts, he has a chance. He's showing us. He's got to build the confidence in us. But there are guys that, again, you learn lessons over the time. There was a guy we wouldn't, even Coach Katie, I always said he was flexible, but we had a guy that was not the toughest guy. He was a little lazy in practice. And then one assistant kept saying, we got to give him a shot. We got to give him a shot. And we were like, God, we're not giving him a shot. He doesn't deserve it. And then once we put him in, and, that's the old commercial with Coach Knight. There's no gamers, well, there are gamers. And this guy ended up being one of the leading scorers in Purdue history because the one assistant said, hey, we got to give him a shot. And we gave him a shot. And that kid took it from there. And he did become a better practice player as it went on. Yeah. But he was not good at the beginning.
And I love how you talked about, especially with shooting, guys struggling, help them to get back to basics. And I think when you do that, the one-hand form shooting, and you help them start over. But you said something too, see the ball go through. Yeah. Remind yourself that, one, you're good at this. You've done this before. Your body can still do this. And it just made me think of the Tin Cup movie with Kevin Costner when he's struggling to hit. He comes in his cat. He says, all right, turn your hat to the side. Put some grass in your or change in your left pocket. Untie your right shoelace. Like all this stuff to get him to stop thinking about the past mistakes. And so it's for us, instead of just, hey, I know you're struggling, but man, just stay with it. You'll get there. I do believe that it's percentages, it's math. If a guy has put in the time and he's prepared, then he has the right to be confident. And if he has a bad shooting day, well, the odds are there's going to be a better one coming. But instead of hoping that they come to that realization, man, let's help them to start over. And I got to imagine, coach, that builds trust between you and the player, because instead of you just, hey, writing him off or hoping he figures it out, man, my coach is spending time to help me get there.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I think it's so important. And sometimes you have 2 or 3 guys, so it's tough after practice. You might have to run the 2 or 3 guys and take time, but it's gonna make a big difference in them and having that success. The other thing too, Matt, it's so important. They've gotta realize to hit that 3, which they wanna do, it might be a layup. It might be a little short shot, that you gotta find a way to get an easy basket in a game. And now all of a sudden, or make a free throw, or just to get involved instead, guys, even guys that are good 3-point shooters, and they hit a bad spot. And let's go find a way to get another shot. I'm gonna run a play and try to get them a layup or something to make them feel good. It's interesting. One thing, Dee Brown was, he's National Player of the Year and unbelievable player. But when I first got there, he didn't shoot lefty layups, and in practice he did a righty layup, and he kept saying John Stockton righty layup. I locked my shoulder and they can't stop it, coach. Well, you can't stop it against big guys can block it unless you use your left hand, and I kept working with him and making him do it. He was so mad at me. But I still remember we were in a game and he made a lefty layup and he ran down the court and he had the biggest smile on his face. And this is the National Player of the Year, one of the best players in the history of college basketball. That we finally got him to make a lefty layup in a game, and he was proud of it.
Love that you talked about how confidence really goes both ways. But I would think that the majority of when you hear of confidence, it's just like you said, my coach took my confidence away, or a parent saying, oh, I really hurt his confidence. So most people are only worried about how the player's confidence, our direction to them. But you nailed it. And one of my favorite things to talk with my team about is, okay, guys, how do you give me more confidence in what you can do? And so kind of taking your team through, your players through, well, showing up early is one. Putting in extra work for sure. How do you handle mistakes? What's your mistake response? When we're doing skill work and we're asking you to make mistakes or push yourself to that level and you do it, are you embarrassed or are you excited because you know you're getting better? All of those things after a turnover, do you give more effort or do you give less? I think as coaches, we need to be open and honest with players about how they can build our confidence in them, because if I'm a player, I wanted Coach Bliss to think, we're struggling. We need Matt. He didn't always think that,
Yes.
but I wanted him to think that. And so I have to do everything I can. But I don't think players know sometimes what it takes to build their coach's confidence in them.
Yeah, and find something that you can do well. And I always talk when you want to get on the court. Well, one, if you defend, everyone needs somebody to defend. We always talk about roles on team, and it's so important. The best teams have the best role players, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it. And it's so important. So figure out a little role to build confidence. It could be defending, it could be rebounding, it could be diving on the floor, it could be your energy, it could be your leadership, all those things. And then now you get your opportunity and you build from it. And now it could become more of a scorer or a distributor or whatever it is. So it's important. But I talk to my grandkids all the time. Whether they're playing soccer and they're right-handed, all of them right now. So you got to use your left foot. You're dribbling. They go to basketball camp. You got to dribble with your left hand. And well, I can't do it. Well, yeah, you can't do it unless you practice, and that's over the course of time. And so it's okay to make mistakes. That's what it's part of. And it's don't be embarrassed and don't laugh. But if you keep doing it over, you will get better. And then you're going to have success, and then you're going to go by other people, and you build that confidence of the coach that you talked about, that they did come in early, watching film, get in and watch film, see what they're talking about. That is, to me, that's the biggest thing.
Before I get you out of here, we're going to do the speed round. These are going to be quick questions. First thing that pops in your head, just blurt it out. We'll get to know you even better.
Okay.
You good with that?
Yep.
First one, coach, an easy one. Favorite ice cream flavor?
I love it. I actually am part owner of a custard place, and it's chocolate, coconut, and vanilla ice cream.
Coach, how are you in a part owner? Do you eat there all the time? If I was a part owner of an ice cream place of any kind, I'd be in trouble.
Well, it's called Custard Cup, and it's in Champaign, and they were going out of business after 40 some years. So a bunch of local people decided to keep it alive. It's kind of a cool thing for my wife
That's
and I
awesome.
and our family that we're a little owner of this thing, and it's kept a nice tradition going in Champaign.
Greatest shooter of all time.
Man,
Tough one.
yeah, it's Steph Curry would come to mind right away. He's got to be up there as one of the top ones. I'm sure there's some others if I keep going back through it.
Did you stand up or sit down more during games?
I went to coach USA basketball in the World Championships, and we won the gold, which was a really cool thing and great team. But the official came up to me and he said, "My scouting report on you, coach, is you a walker." And I said, "A walker?" Yeah. He said, "You never sit down. I just want to tell you, we will watch you." Okay. I rarely sat down. So
You're a walker.
I was a walker.
Top 3 dinner guests, any time period.
I I love sitting down. I mentioned Coach Wood, and there's no doubt
Yeah.
about that. He's truly really is special. Coach Popovich, admire him. I've had a chance to be around him. Yeah, and I guess I would have to go back to my old boss, Coach Katie. I'm going to get a chance to be with him coming up here, and he doesn't remember everything now, but it's still great to be with him and hear his wisdom.
It's a good dinner right there. I'm in Texas where there's no shot clock. For high school, shot clock or no shot clock?
I don't mind the shot clock if it's not too quick. There's
Okay.
got to be some. I don't like where people just stall and hold the ball, and that ruins games too. And I want the kids, but I think we've actually hurt the college game a little bit by pushing that clock because you can't. They say we want to improve scoring, but we take worse shots, so we haven't improved scoring, have we? So, and what won this year in the NBA? It was toughness. It was togetherness that won it. In college basketball, it was toughness that was all part of that Final Four, and defense. And we haven't talked about analytics. There's analytics are important, but I think sometimes when they go extreme like anything else, I'm not sure it's the right thing.
Just use it as a tool, but not something that it's not scripture, There are
Great
some
way of saying it.
Yeah. Favorite holiday?
Oh, I enjoy Christmas. Just
Yeah.
great memories. It's a time of family, of love, of hope, of giving. All the things. I wish we could have Christmas all year round.
Yeah.
I remember just we didn't have much as a family, 5 kids, but I knew on Christmas we were going to get great presents, and my wife and we've tried to do that for our kids and now our grandkids, and but I hope it's also the giving part, and I think that's so important that they feel that part of it also to make sure everyone gets something if possible.
What book would you give someone?
One of my, I'm not a great reader. I'll be honest with you. I never was.
You can always path.
No, but the one I love is Tony Dungy. It's just his presence. And I always, I learned from just listening to him again, like Coach Wooden, a quiet voice, and still have success. And, but that book, Coach Wooden's books, I wouldn't say which one, but any of those are, a lot of those have so many positive things. I always did a quote of the day every day. And that was one of my favorite things preparing the practice plan. I'd ask the coaches and they'd actually start sending them to me. Players would start sending them to me,
Nice.
which was really cool, I thought. And they still send ones back, and they'll, be in a job, and Coach, I had a tough day today, but I remembered something you said. But I love going through, the different books and, Coach Wooden's books, whoever. I had that whole library of books in my office, to find different quotes that I thought were fitting at that time. And I'd mark them, and then, you remember. And sometimes, again, basketball repeats. You might need them 3 years later, but those quotes are important. And the guys remember. I think, again, you think they're not listening, but somebody is. And when I go to camps, I always say, hey, somebody's listening here. I know they are, because I've done this long enough where people have come to me 20 years, 30 years, 40 years later and say, Coach, you said this at camp. And I said, I hope you're one of the listeners, because when you learn to listen, you have a chance. That's another thing when we talked about confidence, learning to listen. Learning to listen. It's so important. You can't learn unless you listen.
Good nuggets right there. 2 more. If this was your last year of coaching, what would you do more of?
I just the daily stuff, the habit, that we talked about earlier, the interaction with the coaches, interaction with the players, communicating with the older players. I think that, it would not be when I went through it, it was not a year off. It was something that I took joy and pride in. I love coaching. It's my life. I love my family. I love my wife. We're 44 years and very, very special, her support, but I enjoyed coaching and I never take it for granted.
One, in basketball as a player, who is the greatest of all time? Who's the GOAT?
Michael Jordan. I know young guys will tell you different, but, that I got to see practice. Tex Winter was Coach Katie's mentor at Kansas State. And then when Tex was with the Bulls and we were at Purdue, I got to go up to sit with Tex, which was unbelievable.
Wow.
And then I go to Kansas State as the head coach, and then Tex moves back there. And he would walk like 2 miles to come to practice just to be around basketball. And at that time, he was not doing very well. So he came in one day, he was freezing, and he had walked, and he forgot to tell somebody, and we would have picked him up something. But I got to go to practice, and his leadership ability, his competitiveness, just amazing. I saw him grab a player by the jersey, and just a role player, 13, 14 guy, and say, we practice hard here. If you don't want to practice hard here, please leave. I saw him tell a superstar player that he didn't lift weights before practice, so we're not starting practice and we're waiting for you to lift. And everyone had to go around, they shot and did skill work and that, but they had to wait for him to go. And again, Tex was an amazing coach. Phil Jackson was an amazing coach, but it helped to have an amazing leader like him. Phil would just sit there.
No doubt.
And here Michael's doing all this leadership stuff. And this wasn't at the beginning. This is after winning championships. So
yeah.
His competitive nature was amazing, and his drive and love of the game. It was special.
Coach, this was so enjoyable for me. Honored to have the hour and 20, 30 minutes with you. And just thank you so much for what you've done for players over the years and for coaches. I think you've probably influenced so many coaches, not just within your tree, but at clinics and things. So just really appreciate you.
I appreciate being on. I love it. Again, for high school coaches, use the older coaches, use the wisdom. Don't be afraid of them. Get guys involved. Help younger coaches. The game is special, and we got to keep promoting the game and helping the game as much as we can, because it's been great to you. I know that it's been good to us and so many people. And this year I have 2 different reunions. And those guys are so proud to be back, to be with each other again, because those are the special moments of your life, and to be part of that. I was blessed to be part of a lot of people's lives and be part of special teams and programs. And again, I never take it for granted.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI Podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.